Welcome, night listener, to Shadow Sleep Stories. Looking for a way to calm your mind or fall asleep to something dark and gripping? You're in the right spot. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe for nightly terror, and comment below, where are you watching from and what time is it? Now, let's close our eyes and begin the journey into the unknown. My name is Ryan Mitchell, and I learned the hard way that some apartments come furnished with more than just furniture. They come with the previous tenant's life, their memories, and sometimes their death. I moved to Chicago fresh out of college with a marketing degree and a bank account that could barely cover a security deposit. The job market was brutal, and I was burning through my savings just trying to survive in the city. After 3 weeks of sleeping on my friend's couch, I was desperate enough to answer a Craigslist ad that seemed too good to be true. Fully furnished, one-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park. $800/month, utilities included. Immediate move-in available. Serious inquiries only. Lincoln Park apartments went for at least $1,500, even for a studio. This had to be a scam, but I was desperate enough to check it out anyway. The landlord, Mr. Vasquez, met me outside a beautiful brownstone building that looked like it cost a fortune to live in. He was a nervous man in his 60s, constantly checking his watch and glancing around like he was afraid someone might see us. "You sure you want to see this place?" he asked as we walked up the stairs to the third floor. "I mean, really sure? Because once you see it, once you know about it, you can't unknow it. I just need a place to live, man. I'm not picky." He stopped outside apartment 3B and pulled out a ring of keys. "The rent is low for a reason, Mr. Mitchell. The previous tenant, there was an incident. Some people might find the atmosphere unsettling." "What kind of incident?" "Jonathan Webb, 26 years old, graphic designer, lived here for 8 months before he..." Vasquez paused, choosing his words carefully. "Before he decided to end his life, right there in the living room." I should have walked away. Any rational person would have, but I was 22, broke, and convinced that dead people couldn't hurt you. "How long ago?" I asked. 6 weeks. Police cleared the scene. Property management company cleaned everything professionally. There's no physical evidence of what happened, but the previous 7 tenants all moved out within a month. Said the place felt wrong. He unlocked the door and stepped aside. "Take a look. If you can handle it, the place is yours. First month's rent, no deposit required." I walked into the apartment and immediately understood why the rent was so low. It wasn't anything I could see. The place was immaculate, beautifully furnished, with exposed brick walls and huge windows overlooking the park. But there was a feeling in the air, a heaviness that made it hard to breathe. The living room was spacious and modern, with a leather couch facing a mounted flat-screen TV. But something about the arrangement felt off, like the furniture had been moved recently and not quite put back in the right places. "Where exactly did it happen?" I asked. Vasquez pointed to a spot in front of the couch. The rope was attached to that beam. He gestured to one of the exposed ceiling beams. Jonathan was found hanging there by his girlfriend when she came to check on him. I stared at the spot, trying to imagine it, then quickly looked away. "The furniture, is this his stuff?" "Most of it. His family took his personal belongings, photos, that sort of thing, but they left the furniture, electronics, even his clothes. Said they couldn't bear to deal with it." I walked through the rest of the apartment. The bedroom had a king-size bed with expensive sheets, a dresser full of clothes that would probably fit me, and a desk with a high-end computer setup. The kitchen was stocked with dishes, cooking equipment, even spices and condiments. It was like stepping into someone else's life, completely intact except for the person who had lived it. "I'll take it," I said. Vasquez looked surprised. "You sure? You don't want to think about it?" "I need a place now, and this is perfect." "When can I move in?" "Tonight if you want. I just need first month's rent in cash." I paid him the $800, signed a month-to-month lease, and got the keys. Within 2 hours, I was living in a dead man's apartment, sleeping in his bed, using his dishes, wearing his clothes. The first few days were actually great. The apartment was in an amazing location. The furniture was nicer than anything I could have afforded, and the rent left me enough money to actually eat decent food while I job hunted. But on the fourth night, I started noticing things. I'd moved some items around to make the place feel more like mine, put my books on the shelves, rearranged the living room furniture, hung my jacket in the closet. But every morning I'd wake up to find things moved back to their original positions. Books returned to their exact spots, furniture repositioned precisely where it had been before. I convinced myself I was imagining things, that I was unconsciously moving things back out of habit. But then I started finding other evidence that someone, or something, was active in the apartment while I slept. The TV would be on different channels than where I'd left it. The thermostat would be adjusted to 68 degrees every morning, even though I preferred it at 72. The computer would be awake when I got up, even though I always shut it down before bed. And then there were the Google searches. I'd sit down at the computer to check email, and when I opened the browser, the search history would show queries I'd never made. How to remove rope burns from ceiling beam. Do ghosts remember being alive? Signs that someone is planning suicide. Afterlife communication methods. I deleted the search history, but new searches would appear every day. They were getting more personal, more specific. Ryan Mitchell's Chicago marketing jobs, how to make new tenant leave apartment, forcing someone to understand depression. That's when I realized that whatever was happening wasn't random. Something was actively researching me, learning about me, trying to communicate with me. I decided to set up a test. Before going to bed, I placed a sheet of paper and pen on the coffee table with a note. If someone is here, please write to me. The next morning, the paper was covered with handwriting I didn't recognize. You're living my life, sleeping in my bed, wearing my clothes, using my things. But you don't understand what it was like. You can't just take over someone's existence and ignore their pain. Asterisk. I stared at the note, my hands shaking. This was impossible, but the handwriting was consistent, the words were coherent, and nobody else had access to the apartment. I wrote back, "What do you want from me?" That night, I stayed awake, watching the living room from the bedroom doorway. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I saw him. He was translucent, like looking through fog, but unmistakably human. A young man about my age wearing a t-shirt and jeans, sitting on the couch in the exact spot where he'd ended his life. He was writing on the paper, his ghostly hands somehow able to manipulate physical objects. When he finished writing, he looked up directly at me. Our eyes met, and I felt a wave of emotion that nearly knocked me over. Crushing sadness, overwhelming despair, and a loneliness so profound it made me want to cry. He mouthed something I couldn't hear, then faded away. In the morning, I found his response. "I want you to understand, living here using my things, it's like you're playing a role in my life without knowing the script. You're happy in a place where I was miserable. You're succeeding where I failed. It's not fair." Asterisk, I wrote back, "I'm sorry you were in pain, but I can't change what happened to you." Our written conversations continued for weeks. Through these notes, I learned about Jonathan Webb's life. He'd moved to Chicago with big dreams, just like me. He'd gotten a good job at a design firm, just like I was hoping to do. He'd furnished this apartment with love and care, thinking it would be the start of his new life. But the job had been toxic. His boss was abusive, his coworkers competitive and cruel. He'd worked 60-hour weeks for months, slowly burning out, becoming isolated and depressed. He tried therapy, medication, reaching out to friends, but nothing helped. The worst part was how successful he'd looked from the outside. Great apartment, good job, nice clothes. Everyone thought he had it all together, which made him feel even more alone when he was falling apart inside. "You remind me of myself when I first moved in," he wrote one night. "Optimistic, ambitious, convinced that Chicago was going to be my big break. I want to warn you about what's coming." Asterisk. "What's coming?" I wrote back. "The job interviews that go nowhere. The slow realization that your degree doesn't matter as much as you thought. The gradual erosion of hope. The way the city slowly crushes your spirit until you're just going through the motions of living." Asterisk. I wanted to argue with him, to tell him that my experience would be different. But I was starting to see his point. I'd been in Chicago for 6 weeks and hadn't gotten a single job offer. My savings were running out, and I was beginning to feel the same isolation he described. I don't want you to end up like me, he wrote, but I also can't stand watching you live the life I wanted, in the place where I died. Asterisk. That's when I realized what was really happening. Jonathan wasn't just haunting the apartment. He was trying to save me from making the same mistakes he had. But his presence was also making it impossible for me to move forward with my own life. Every day I was reminded of his failure, his despair, his death. The apartment that should have been my fresh start was becoming a monument to someone else's tragedy. I started researching Jonathan's death more thoroughly. I found news articles, social media posts, even his online portfolio. He'd been incredibly talented, with a bright future ahead of him. But the pressure to succeed in a competitive industry had overwhelmed him. I also found something else. A suicide note he'd posted on his blog the night he died. I thought I could handle the pressure, but I was wrong. Chicago is a city that eats dreamers alive. I came here to build a life, but all I built was a beautiful prison. To whoever lives in my apartment next, learn from my mistakes. Don't let the city kill your spirit the way it killed mine. Asterisk. Reading that note, I finally understood what Jonathan was trying to tell me. He wasn't just warning me about job interviews and career setbacks. He was warning me about losing myself in the pursuit of success. But I also realized that his continued presence was part of the problem. As long as he remained tied to this apartment, to his death, neither of us could move forward. That night, I wrote him a longer letter. Jonathan, I understand now what you're trying to tell me. You don't want me to make the same mistakes you did, but you're stuck here, reliving your worst moments, and it's not helping either of us. You need to let go, and I need to find my own path. Asterisk. I'm going to move out, not because I'm giving up on Chicago, but because I'm not going to let your tragedy become my prophecy. You died believing that the city would destroy anyone who tried to make it here. But maybe you were wrong. Maybe some of us can survive and even thrive. Asterisk. I promise I'll remember your story. I'll be careful not to let work consume my life the way it consumed yours. But you have to promise me something too. You have to move on. Stop haunting this place and find whatever peace is waiting for you. Asterisk. The next morning, there was one final note on the table. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring about someone you never met. You're stronger than I was, Ryan. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. This city doesn't have to destroy you if you don't let it. Asterisk. I'm ready to go now. Take care of yourself. Asterisk. That was the last time I saw or heard from Jonathan Webb. I moved out of the apartment the following week, using the money I'd saved on rent to get a small studio in a different neighborhood. It wasn't as nice as Jonathan's place, but it was mine. I eventually found a job at a small marketing firm. Not the prestigious position I dreamed of, but good work with decent people who treated me well. I made friends, dated, built a life that was slower and less ambitious than what I'd originally planned, but ultimately happier. I never forgot Jonathan's warnings. When work got stressful, I remembered his story and made sure to maintain boundaries. When the city felt overwhelming, I reached out to friends instead of isolating myself. When I was tempted to judge my worth by external success, I remembered that Jonathan had appeared successful right up until the end. 6 months later, I drove past the brownstone building where Jonathan had lived and died. There was a for rent sign in the window of apartment 3B, and a young woman was looking up at it from the sidewalk, phone in hand, probably calling about the listing. I parked the car and approached her. Excuse me, are you thinking about renting that apartment? Yeah, the price is amazing for this neighborhood. Do you live here? I used to live in that unit. Look, I don't want to scare you, but there's something you should know before you sign a lease. I told her Jonathan's story. Not the supernatural parts. She would have thought I was crazy. But the real story about a young man who died in that apartment and why the rent was so low. She thanked me and walked away, deciding to look elsewhere. I probably cost Mr. Vasquez, another potential tenant. But I couldn't let someone else walk into that situation without knowing what they were getting into. Because some apartments aren't just furnished with furniture and appliances. They come with history, with emotion, with the weight of the lives that were lived and lost within those walls. And sometimes the best thing you can do for both the living and the dead is to acknowledge that history, learn from it, and then choose to write your own story somewhere else. Jonathan Webb taught me that success isn't worth your life, that appearances can be deceiving, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit when you're struggling. He also taught me that moving on isn't about forgetting the past. It's about learning from it and refusing to let it define your future. I never saw him again after that final note. I hope that means he found peace, and I hope that apartment 3B eventually found a tenant who could live there without being haunted by someone else's tragedy. But I also hope that whoever moves in there next takes the time to learn Jonathan's story, because the dead can't hurt you, but they can teach you if you're brave enough to listen. The city of Chicago didn't kill my dreams the way it killed Jonathan's, but it easily could have if I hadn't had a ghost to warn me about the dangers of losing yourself in the pursuit of success. Sometimes the best roommate you can have is someone who's already learned the hard lessons about life, even if they had to die to learn them. You